Okay, cool. So I think I'm gonna use YouTube Studio to set up my streams because then I can actually choose the latency. Anyways, so it's been I have to say huge thanks yesterday for the stream. I also got a comment yesterday about the stream talking about global versus scoped state, where we pivoted impact and considering pivoting back in terms of some learnings. But we're not like completely just reverting it. We learn a lot of stuff. So the thing is, with Impact as its initial implementation, you had this really nice concept of isolated stores, and it made me think about how Impact is how Overmind, being global, has this rigid structure to it where it doesn't matter like how nested your namespaces are, you always go from the root and you can like look at all your state. But there are issues with global state, as we talked about yesterday, because in Overmind you define all your state as default, meaning you will have a lot of null values because the state hasn't been initialized yet, or potentially have a lot of null values. And you have to type that. And then when you consume this from components, you'll have, wait, what happened? Let's see. Let me just double check that you can still hear me. Okay. Yeah, it seems to be fine. So where was I? Yeah, so you have a lot of null default values in Overmind because it's global. And it's declarative, right? You kind of just define all your state, which is a beautiful thing because you actually get like the mental image of all the state of your application. But yeah, you have this strict null checking problem, which is what actually led this whole journey to where we got with Impact. And with Impact, we have these stores that you mount through the components. So you don't have like this single global store. You have these decoupled stores that is mounted through your component tree. And it's a beautiful thing because you instantiate stores as you need them, being driven by the UI. But then things got lost because when you tangle those stores, like literally in the file structure, in the directories, you tangle like the stores with the components, it's very hard to figure out where is the state management. You have to like dive through UI components to send, oh, there it is, which you can actually see here. Let's see if we close others. Sorry. So let's change this. Git add blah, git push, and this is which it's ratchet. Okay, git checkout main. So if we take a look at this structure, like what we see here is that we have like the main. Oh, can you see this? Let me do this. So you have this main structure, and then you have this use global context here. And then you have app context, and then you have use app context, and then you go to dinners, but there's nothing in dinners. But if you go to edit dinner context, which would be kind of store, you have that in there. And it's like some of it is UI components, some of it is state components, and it's maybe that's what you prefer, but I really don't like that. So that's what we kind of did with the Ratchet branch, is that now you have this, again, sorry. Now you have this app folder. Yeah, sorry about the uppercase here. It's just Git. And now all of this is state management. And you can see that we have this main app, which has a version. We have Firebase. In Family Scrum, we have a camera. We have the dinners logic. We have the groceries logic. We have the to-dos logic. Like, and this is what we find very useful with Overmind in CodeSandbox version 1 as well. It's like we have an app folder. There you find all the state management and effects, everything that's happening. It's the actual functionality of the application. While we have a components folder, which is the UI of the application. And that makes a shit ton of sense. Now, if we choose to do global, that's a given. Like, it's a given that you split it up into these two different folders. But as we could see, like yesterday, I was kind of struggling, like building up this global store. I got stuck in a few things, but I didn't have that experience when I had these scoped stores. One thing is that if you have a global store, you can think of your application as very much decoupled from the UI. So you can kind of imagine building different UIs with the same application. Whereas if you mount the stores with the UI, you might lean into designing your state management for a specific UI. But I'm not sure if that's true. The thing is that we found like a novel approach to state management, something that has really gotten lost in React, which is having like this controller type of structure that has been used up to React. Like React has context, but we don't think about it as a controller. What we do props passing instead. It's kind of the thing that's being elevated as the way to do like shared state management as well, but that's like, it's a horrible experience. And it gets even harder to find the state of your application, because now it's not only hidden in the components folder structure, it's actually hidden inside some component that's named by the UI, but it holds state that's related to nested UI. So it's like, it's not good. So what I want to try to do to kind of see if we should really go back to this thing in terms of structure is that we're just going to create a new branch for the family Scrum app. Main git checkout. And like, as I said, nothing's lost. Like what we've learned here is like untangling state management is more about how you structure your files and folders as opposed to global and scoped state. We've also changed the signature of the Signal API, which I think is much better now. And we have Immer in there by default, which just makes a shit ton of sense. So you can make like mutation updates to the signals, and it will like properly change the references for you. Test global folder. Anyways, so what we're basically going to do here, we're going to create this app folder again. But now we're going to change this. And even though this is an older Impact API, it's like based on the same thing. So what we're going to do is, let's just first move this use global context. And we are going to, let's see, so this is, and I'm just going to rename the files, not any code, because we're only interested in the actual, let's see. So we want this to be in the app itself. Let's just move it in the app. So we get rid of that global context. Version. views. So the thing here is, like, one thing I struggled the most with was like, okay, we have authentication in front of the Family Scrum app. And I really just wanted to do the authentication first. And when you're authenticated, then we instantiate the Family Scrum app. But in the context of a global state store, you have to hook the Family Scrum app to the authenticated state. But in this decoupled scope world, you can just create an authentication store, and then, god damn it, how do I do this? Bluetooth, not file exchange, Bluetooth. There we go, Bluetooth. When last Bluetooth headset with someone else. Doesn't work very well. It would be nice if kind of the AirPod Max would kind of detect the what's it called, the how far apart the earpieces are, to detect different people using it. And then I could say, like, this is me, and then that's connected to my devices. We still, yeah. Or which, yeah, I don't know. You kind of have sound profiles. Anyways, so what we would do here is we would have an authentication store. Authentication store. We would have a camera store. We would have a version store. We might not call them necessarily store, but let's just be very explicit here. Now, the point is that so here we have authentication store. Let's see. And what I wonder is, yeah, it doesn't matter. And then use authentication. Yeah, so this is also a thing. So with the global versus scoped stores, like, these aren't actually different stores. I should change this. So this is how should we put this? The point is that this is just parts of the sorry, I did this the wrong way. So these aren't the stores, and this is just functionality of the App Store views. And then this is the App Store. Let's call it app. Should we call it store? That's kind of nice. Maybe not. The point is that I'm exploring having a nested structure here, so that this is like the let's call it that App Store. Yeah, and then this is also you know what? Let's call it stores. And then we have App Store. And then we have a new folder called, I think we call it app context here. You have to excuse me. I'm just reflecting as we're. But this is the actual Family Scrum app. So let's create that folder, Family Scrum store. The point is that I wouldn't do use authentication on these things. I would rather use create authentication, because they're not stores. They are just, you're just composing a store. So I would call that create authentication, and then the actual store itself is exported as like use app, for example, use app store, use Family Scrum store with the related provider. So what we would do here is move that in here. And I don't think it really has anything else. So I would rename that to Family Scrum Store. And then you would have like, it's interesting how most of these have a single file. It's kind of unique for the App Store. Okay, let's try doing this. New folder, App Store. Now the point is it necessary to have the nesting? Because these rely on each other. So you can't mount the Family Scrum Store without the App Store, because the Family Scrum Store depends on the App Store. But maybe that's fine. And then you would have edit dinner store. Okay, let's just write them out. Grocery store, groceries store. Yeah, maybe you don't even need this. App. Edit dinner. Family Scrum. Rename groceries. Yeah, anyways, so this is what I mean. It's like, you can do this nested thing, but as I said, to me, it's very confusing. I have a hard time finding the state management when I do that. But if I have a stores folder instead, and I have like a components folder, then it's much easier to just find the state management. Like, there's something about editing a dinner. There's something about groceries or the main application. Yeah, we could even call this global. This is the global store. Yeah. I think that makes a lot more sense. And then what you kind of lose here is the relationship between them, like their dependencies. So global is, you have to mount that first, then you can mount Family Scrum. And you can't mount, let's see, do we have them here? Let's do groceries, use groceries context. So you can see here, you see that groceries context depends on global and Family Scrum in this case. So that's how you see their dependencies, which is not reflected in the folder structure. You could, of course, move groceries in here and also edit dinner in here to kind of show that dependency. But I guess that's more up to you. How do you want to structure this? Now, so one thing, yeah. So what this also solves is having to pass around these dependencies. So as you can see, you can just use global context here. You don't have to pass it in, which is also super powerful. You can also pass in based on the UI state, some properties about the UI when you mount the store, which can be taken into account. Also, you avoid, even though you technically can create async stores, you kind of avoid it because you rather implement the asynchronicity in React itself. And then only when you have a resolved UI state, you mount a store. So it felt much more natural to do this when I implemented it compared to the global version. It also emphasizes that you don't have to. So I wrote this new documentation about deriving UI, where I talk about like the mental model for this, and it's the functionality of your app. It doesn't matter what UI you build in front of it, all of them should be able to use the same functionality out of the box. And that is true for the scoped stores as well. Like you can create different UIs, but here when it's global, we have to kind of answer the question, what should be in the state store and what should not be in the state store. But when you scope them to components, it becomes less important to make that differentiation. It's more just follow your intuition. So when you scope it to like specific components, it becomes more natural to do routing in the components, for example. Because what you do is you take the information from the route and then you mount the store based on route information, as opposed to just calling an action inside a global state store. Also, here I'm mentioning like tabs. I'm not sure if this is such a bad thing to mention regardless, because I see these things as very much non-state management. Like this is UI state. Even tabs. Because tabs is just a way to display a state. Like, to put it in a different way, you can choose to show. So let's say you have a feature behind every tab. And in one UI, you want it to be, each feature should be hidden behind each tab, but in a different UI, you want to show all the features at the same time. There you don't want tabs, right? It's the same with the routing. It's like maybe one version of the UI just shows everything on the page, while another version of the UI has specific routes for specific functionality. But then you have this challenge of persisting that. So for example, if you want to persist, let's say you're moving between two pages and you want to persist the tab you had selected. So you had like active feature or something. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I like the mental model of thinking about your application as potentially having different, or having the flexibility to be implemented in different UIs. It also helps you, use the same state management for a mobile application, tablet application, and like a web application. Like you implement different UIs for that, but you can keep your state management. But maybe on the web application, you don't have tabs, but you have it on the tablet version, for example. And you can say you can use responsible layout for that, but that's not true. It's much better when you have these kind of complex applications. You want to think about each of these experiences in isolation, in my experience. But this is a tricky one because you want tabs to potentially be persisted. But is that then the responsibility of Impact in this case? It's like hard to state. Even if you call the state active feature, for example, yeah, it's a tricky one. But like collapse, expand, again, you might want to persist that forever. So that means that should also be part of like Impact. But like animations, transitions, drag and drop, you don't want that state to be in Impact for sure. So it's not like, yeah, it's really hard to differentiate this. What is UI state? Maybe a way to differentiate it is to not call it UI state, but call it element state. So animations is element state. Transitions is element. Well, but then what is routing? Routing isn't element state. That is like UI state. Yeah, it's really, really tricky to differentiate what's UI and what's like state management in isolation. Yeah, I was hoping to have some like clear boundaries on this, but maybe there just isn't. Because like even models, it's so much easier to handle models if you do it globally. And you can just rely on different states, and even having the possibility to do something async inside your state store and then close the model after that async thing is done, not having to rely on UI to do that or a React component, it is really, really powerful. So you do want to manage that inside a state store. I'm very confident of. And you could argue that is UI. But you can also like say that it's, you don't have to even call it a model, right? You can call it something else, but I don't think that really helps. And then you can even say a model is a generic concept of displaying information on top of something else. And then how you implement that in your UI could be like on a mobile, it could cover the whole screen, right? But it's still considered a model. So like it's really hard to set these boundaries. So I'm not sure if I should be explicit about this. Rather see if your intuition leads you to the right choice. But where were we? Yeah, we were looking at this. So I wanna. So I'm trying to define what's good and bad here. So we had kind of a similar structure in version 2 only we used context and we called it features. And they were like, even though some of the features depended on other features, we would have this flat, like the folder was called features, and you would have the different features there. And I think that is very helpful to get a glance of what, basically what features are we providing. Though you lose the relationship between those features, that one feature depends on another feature. And then you have, like in Overmind, you have this cross namespace access. So sometimes you have two features that basically just depends on each other, or two domains that depends on each other. And in Overmind, you can handle that. You can have two different domains because you're always going from the root of your application and looking at state and actions and everything. But here you can't do that. Like you can use parent state, like parent stores, but you can't use sibling stores. Well, not in both directions, at least. So that is very interesting. So you can't handle like circular things. But that isn't, and you can argue that's wrong modeling of your management, like the application. And maybe that's good enough. Yeah, I'm trying to come to a conclusion here. So I think what we also learn here is like, what should we sell this? Oh yeah, I zoomed it in. So Impact is complex single page applications with React. That's what it's designed for. And untangle your state management is still the same statement. I think that's a much better statement than global. Yeah, I think that's also a good perspective, like more disposable. Because that defines like why it's global. It's because it persists globally, right? And I guess that's the thing. It's like, yeah, but that's a good example. So I think a really good example of this is the edit dinner. So editing a dinner is a temporary state management. You pass in a dinner. It's very complex. Is it still a few minutes behind? Oh, yeah, because I changed the settings on the stream, so it should be much quicker. Oh, sorry. Okay, it was you. Okay, but now we're like, we're in. That's nice. Anyways, so like edit dinner. Let's find it. So editing a dinner is very complex. There's a lot of like it has validation. It has a lot of fields. You need to save or save the actual dinner, which is async. You have to optimistically update the dinner's data. You might cancel it, right? So it's very much like a temporary thing. So you and we were playing around with this yesterday, like disposing it, or having it like we had this like map of potentially editing multiple dinners. And the nice thing, yeah, so this is a good one. Like I remember yesterday you mentioned that your manager said, no, we need to edit multiple things. So if you have like a edit dinner store, which holds the state management of editing a dinner, in your UI, you can just say, okay, create a component, provide the edit dinner state management, and then you have that UI, and it will dispose of itself when it unmounts. And then if you wanted to do multiple, you could just, in the component, you could just have multiple providers of edit dinner. I'm not saying that's like a strong argument for like doing that, but it's an interesting thing, because I do agree, like UI is generally much more disposable because UI in itself is disposable. But there's also an argument for state management to be disposable, or at least being temporary. So for an example of that would be like, maybe when you're editing a dinner, you want to subscribe to changes to the original dinner. So when you save it, you want to know if it has changed in the meantime. And that subscription should be disposed when you're not editing the dinner anymore. And that would all be contained in the edit dinner store. Yeah. So the thing for me that was the most annoying with like the original thing with Impact is that I was still tangling it with the components, in the sense that I was tangling it with the directories and files of the components, as opposed to what we're doing here. You just say stores, and then you could think of this as okay, so let's, from the perspective of Overmind, instead of saying app, you say stores. And each store is a namespace, but they're more loosely coupled. They're not like, you don't go into like the root namespace and then you rigidly compose in each namespace. You just define a store. And then, so for example, here we have the global store. And when we go into Family Scrum, we define another store, and that store has some dependencies in terms of props. So here it expects to get a user and a family to be able to use this store. So that means, from the perspective of your components, you would do your authentication, you would get the user and the family, and then you provide the actual Family Scrum store by providing the user and the family to this store. And then this can use the global store. So it's decoupled, kind of like how context is decoupled in React. But you still have co-located all your state management. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do something. We're going to test something. I'm going to move back to... I have to log in. It's still over. I'm on. Yeah, and I think like this is the whole... It's so funny to me that this strict null checking is the whole reason for us sitting here having this discussion. It's strict null checking. It's kind of crazy. And I just love the idea of having global state just defining your whole application with default values. You have the debugger showing you the full state tree of all possible state values. It's a beautiful thing. And then it doesn't matter like what you do. Yeah, it's just that the code becomes more... I don't know how to even put it. But I really love that concept. It's like I remember a backend developer at Code Sandbox was gonna play around and try to figure out a bug in the client, and I told her to could you install the debugger because it's gonna help you build your mental image. I can't quite remember I think I showed it to her. I'm not sure she used it, but I showed it to her at least. But she fixed the bug, right? Which is good. But the point is, like, if you have a brand new developer coming on their team with the Overmind dev tool, you can just show them the state tree and they'll immediately understand so much about your application. And this is not the case here. You don't have that overview. Okay, we have the stores folder now, because this is just about how you structure your stores, which does give you a lot of insight into how the application works, but it doesn't give you that full mental image. But maybe something we could do, which I haven't thought about, is that Impact knows about the return, knows about all the instantiated stores. Maybe I thought about like Impact has a debugger, but maybe I thought about it the wrong way, because it's just a signal debugger, which is kind of cool because the signal debugger actually shows you the file and line of code that listens to a signal or observes a signal and triggers a signal where it's actually changed. But Impact also knows about all the stores, so it could actually produce a state tree for you. It could. It even knows. It even knows the nested structure of stores. So it knows what stores depends on other stores. So you could have the same nested structure as the Overmind dev tool, showing you how the stores are being mounted. Yeah, anyways. Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a valid thing. It's it's such a valid thing to state, the strict null checks. And what I would want to do is on Overmind, there should really be, in the TypeScript section, it should really state do not activate strict null checks. You don't need it, because the sheer insight you get through the dev tools and just the way you organize files and folders and compose your app, you don't need it. You really don't need it. And Impact is then a solution that supports strict null checking. Like, strict null checking is a good thing generally, because every single piece of code you write helps you validate if the thing you're accessing is actually available or not. It's not you as a developer that knows that it's available or not. It's actually the code that knows it. So you do avoid some issues. But like, I remember when I built Cerebral, like, that was a complex application, and it wasn't even TypeScript. It was just JavaScript. And that proved that if you have a good mental model of the with the primitives of the like state management tool, and you have a good debugger, you get so far with that. It's kind of like just a different tool than strict null checking. Uh, oh, you have strict null checking on in your code base? Don't you get a lot of, what do? Do you write a lot of if statements? Or maybe you just don't have a lot of null state. Or do you like do overrides? Like you use the exclamation mark to just tell TypeScript, no, this thing is really here. Oh, sorry. I do not have strict null checks. Yeah. Do have lots of if checks. Yeah. Yeah. But at least what happens with impact when you so I guess it's a trade-off. It's like you can go global, you can dump the complete mental, like the mental model of the app, and like, how should I put this? You can use Overmind, and the dev tool is able to represent something very similar to a traditional mental model of an app. Yeah, and it's very easy to onboard people if you have junior developers. Like I remember with Cerebral, we had someone who hadn't coded before at all, and he was able in like, I guess 3 months or something, he was like just developing new stuff on his own. But he only knew Cerebral, right? He didn't know JavaScript. So the things we helped him with was like, how do you express this in the language? But in terms of expressing functionality, implementing state management, he was just, it was no problem. So that's also the power. Like Impact is not junior developer friendly, I think. But React isn't junior developer friendly either. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's definitely a trade-off here. So I would never say that Impact is like the thing that, so like Overmind is definitely the thing that comes after Cerebral. But I would not state that Impact is what comes after Overmind. It's just a different, it's just a different way to do it that has like, takes more advantage of React's like new data fetching paradigm, not data fetching paradigm, but promise async paradigm with the use hook. We had this example we built using an early version of Impact where when we load Code Sandbox, we do a lot of different things. Like you download the sandbox, you connect to the dev process, and during connecting to the dev process, you get different events based on the progress of connecting to it. And then after that, you like mount the editor, or you mount VS Code, and then you mount the editor. And this was actually split into like 5 different places, and we were able to express that in one single component. That whole insanely complicated async loading of the editor, because we have these observable promises that where we can choose to use suspense, or we can use inline observation of the promise itself, and then we have this mounting of state management. So that's also a thing. It's like you don't have an editor without the sandbox data, for example. So that would also be a null thing. Like all the editor state or like current sandbox would be null, which is a problem. It shouldn't be null at some point. Yeah, but yeah, I wanna look at taking all we learned here and then create a branch of. Do we have it here? Impact. Git checkout main. Merging ideas. So I want to keep some of what we did and then put back some of what we removed. I wonder how, yeah. Let's see. Another thing is that we also did there is that you can choose to use observer as like a higher order thing or with the using keyword. That's also a huge benefit here. I personally prefer the using keyword, but I don't think everyone does. Let's see. And also the fact that we don't tie a store to its observation. So one thing is observing, another thing is using a store. So you don't use the using keyword with the usage of a store in a component, and then you don't use the using keyword in the consumption of a store in another store. It's just confusing. Like observation is observation. So we can fix that. Okay, let's see, how should we do this? How should we do this? Let's see. Who's that? Yeah, can be frustrating easy. I was related to AI and stuff. I read the Python book. And Python is really great. It's super accessible, and it has a really nice approach to typing. And it has some great features, like in terms of just syntax. I really like Python, like at least in theory. I haven't worked with it enough to have an actual opinion, but let's see. Warn about July. I guess this is where we want to. Okay, how should I do this? Should I just copy the whole thing in? Because I didn't change. Okay, let's bring this one in. It's not related to this, but yeah, because I got confused when you stated that you got all these warnings from TypeScript about null checking, because you only get that if you have strict null checking, which is why you need all these if statements to make TypeScript happy. But I wonder, like, have you felt? Do you feel like it's that TypeScript is working against you? Like you're sitting there, you're consuming some state in the component, you know the state is there, but TypeScript is giving you an error consuming that state. Because that's the you can take that feeling times 10,000. That's how we felt when we turned on strict null checking in the version 1 editor, because it was so overwhelming what we would have to do to make TypeScript happy. Yeah, and it is correct, right? It really is. There is a chance that that you are consuming state that might actually be null. But yeah. But it is interesting though that you kind of. But do you have like? How do you express these if statements? Are they like at the top? You do like? Do you have these fake if statements that kind of just at the top you say if this is null, just return, and then you have the actual logic because you know that you don't really run this logic without null, or you don't really run this logic without having some state there. So you kind of just fake return at the top. Or do you feel like the if statements are there to actually like? It doesn't feel verbose or unnecessary. What was I doing? We have observer context. We have signal tracker, signal. I'm gonna drop the store as well. That's something we learned. We don't need the store. We have signal. Wait, is this the old one? Oh, this is the old one. Wow, I made a lot of commits. Yeah, lots of return null. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, I would. But that is my itch. That feeling. It's like the question is like I had this very traumatic experience of suddenly turning on strict mode. Strict null checking, and just got like I don't know how many. I think it was like thousands of strict null errors. Suddenly turning it on. Maybe we wouldn't have felt that way if we had it on from the beginning. But it's still an itch for me, like returning null when I know it can never happen. But then I probably have a much stronger itch on that because I have this, I think, talking about like passion and stuff, I have this passion of your code and your mental image being aligned, like as if the code has a mental image of the app on its own and it should align with your mental image. And that's what I really like about Overmind, because it's like you're literally in code just expressing this tree of state. That is very much like how I think most people think about state. But yeah, but then there are other aspects where, like with strict null checking, that it just doesn't work. Like you it just messes with you in the sense that with strict null checking, there's something the code doesn't align with you on, and that's kind of the conceptual passion behind this project. Is like, okay, how can we realign these mental images or mental models? And then you can argue like doing what Impact is doing here now is like diverges from the natural mental image in other ways. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Was it this old? Is this 3 weeks ago? Fix Playground. Wait, this should have. I don't understand this. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Is development. And then store. Oh, get active store container. Store container. Cleanup. We need cleanup. We need use store. We need store provider. Signal debug hooks. Okay, there we go. Doop. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember I was having a discussion with actually the founder at Code Sandbox. He really enjoys Overmind as well, and he is such a beast when it comes to implementing things. He's very much of like a hacker prototype like he's an excellent programmer, an amazing intuition, and he can build anything, but he appreciates not being like the programming language, the tools he uses doesn't like push back, and he's felt that Overmind just lets him express what he needs to do. I think you pointed to that as well. So there's something about that's a lot of value, not feeling pushback by the tool. And we often have discussions, like I can follow him when he writes his code and argue about terminology. This doesn't reflect how I think about it. Like he can use a lot of. I complain to him constantly about his double negative. Like he names his variables, instead of is visible, he says is not visible. Like that's how fast he's moving. It's like he has a scenario of something not being visible, and then he just writes that. It just pours out of him, instead of like taking a step aside and thinking about like, okay, how do I describe this as best as possible, kind of thing, because it takes time and you can argue about the value of it and all of that stuff. But when you do an if statement and you say if exclamation mark is not visible, so you're basically saying is not visible. Then you get into these issues. But my point is there's a lot of value in not getting that pushback. Let's see, read store. Where is the, why did it give an error on store provider? Hey, store. Don't we have a store? Oh, we do have. I'm actually not sure where I was going with this. Yeah, so maybe I'm trying to find something, because and that's why I appreciate your feedback. It's because it emphasizes the value of not getting any pushback. Developing your app, you're just kind of doing it and it feels natural. But then I have this like deep obsessive itch that something is misaligning when your app doesn't understand what you understand about your code, which is basically this strict null checking that kind of just highlights that. So I have to excuse me. And I think that's why that's what we're doing here. It's like we have Overmind, which is this just no pushback at all. Like just go in and build the thing, get this amazing mental image through the dev tools, get a lot of insight, feel super productive, really great tool if you're a mixed team of junior and senior developers. And then you have impact, which is trying to still keep the best parts of having this, like keeping as much as possible of this non-pushback kind of tool. Like you just go in and you implement it. Don't think about performance, or just use the stores. You don't have to do a lot of boilerplating and all of that stuff. But still it tends to this itch of the strict null check. Active component observer context. Active component observer context. Didn't I? Oh, I didn't put that in here. Where's that? Active component observer. Active component. Oh, here we go. Oh, I didn't put in. Oh, I'm missing this. No, I did put in uStore, didn't I? Yeah. Oh. What's this? What are you complaining about? Oh, oh yeah, sorry. So this is the observation thing I need to fix. So we're not gonna do any observation in result store. Yeah, so that will be this. This is observation. I wonder if this should rather be part of. Okay, so let me take this. That should be fine. And then where we actually do the observation and we have the let's see. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Well, I don't think we need that thing. Active component. Okay, active component. Okay, we don't need this thing anymore. Is there other things we don't need? Is development? We don't need is development. Okay, nice. Great. Cool. I actually think that's I think that's it. What I also like about this is that we have a very strong concept of what a store is. I like that. What is this context pop? New observer context. Oh yeah, stack pop. Maybe it should actually point to this. It's a bit confusing that we're popping on the actual instance. I think we should rather do this. It shows better that we're popping the stack of observer contexts. We're not popping the context. Yeah, talking about, yeah, that's fine. Let's see me. Did we run a lot of stuff in this other thing? I think we did. No, we didn't. Great. Oh, impact. So yarn dev, and then we're gonna impact react yarn build. Let's take a quick look at what this looks like now. Dev. Yeah. So let's call it App Store or Counter Store. So what we do here now is what did I call it? Use counter, use store, counter store. I think I need to restart TS server. Yeah. Counter equals use counter. So now this is how, counter equals use counter. So you could use observer instead. Oh. Counter. But I personally prefer this because like here we have memo, and you don't have to like have two of these, observer and memo. And also if we need, like, I don't really need to observe here because the time is we're using the use hook here, but let's just do it for fun. And here I can just use a function, and I can like export this. So it's a very natural way of defining components, and that still works just fine. Cool. Let's look at the actual app here. Wait, does it have an issue? So annoying that it loses that. So that still works. Cool. So I'm going to, it's kind of boring writing documentation. I'm gonna stop the stream, and then I'm gonna write documentation to kind of finalize the reflections here. And then, yeah, as like a final iteration on this. And then we're gonna do a new stream where we actually refactor the family Scrum app, where we have this approach where we create like a app folder and we co-locate all the stores, and then see how that feels. Because then it's a much faster refactor because the API is very, very similar. But we can use the patterns. Like we use the new signal signature. That's much more, it doesn't have the dot value all over the place. The private functions pattern where we have functions after a return statement that are like private, and then kind of take a look at it. I'm going to share that with a colleague as well, and then we make like a final conclusion. Yep. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I think I can just copy a lot of documentation, really. Yeah, but I think we should do that. And then I'll do another stream tomorrow morning. And then everything should be good. Yeah. Okay. Thanks again for following along and giving all the feedback. But yeah, I think kind of as a final conclusion here, Impact isn't intended as a replacement for Overmind. It's for teams. It's a preference thing, I guess. Maybe it turns out that these patterns are actually really, really valuable. Like we haven't used Impact extensively. We have used it a little bit, and we haven't like fully embraced it yet. But it does solve the issues that we've been facing. So for us, it's either go back to Overmind, but then I would turn off strict null checking, or we'll use this this tool. And I know there's a lot of I had this conversation with this other engineer by coincidence. I was going to talk about something completely different, and we wound up, and he was actually, it was so funny. He had actually worked at Apple as machine learning team leader. So funny. We're going to talk about AI, and then we ended up talking about React. And we talked about how React is missing this controller concept, which is context, but you always end up like just shoving that context up to the top. And it's so verbose. It's so hard to express logic in them. They're so slow and all that stuff. And I talked to him about, and I was like, yes, we need to bring back like the controller. And that's what this is. So, and it needs to be there. Like you have local component state, props passing for state management, shared state management. And then you have, it's always felt like that. You have to choose that or you choose global. I think there's value in having a middle way there where you have the scoped state management. And that's what the Impact is. It's like, if you're happy with global state, you should choose like from things I've done, like I would do Overmind or something similar. But if your mental model fits that, no, you're used to having these controller layers around your UI, then Impact has that controller concept or structure to your state management. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, bye for now.